Global stratification is the separation and hierarchy of status within countries around the world. On the micro level, stratification refers to societal divisions based on class and wealth. For centuries, Europe exercised global dominance without parallel, leading to the conquering of other populations. Europe was able to establish this dominance during the earliest world systems because of their vast access to natural resources. This led to Europe's growing superiority as their expansion forced language and cultural values amongst other nations. Their expeditions into other areas of the world proved their dominance when they saw underdeveloped civilizations that they could easily conquer and exploit. As European powers grew stronger, the demand for new resources and expansion became more aggressive. Because of this, European expeditions headed west to find new undiscovered territory. This led to the colonization of the United States. Soon after, American society would be forever changed as a new hierarchical arrangement was created. Europe had a profound effect on the United States by influencing its class structure. It was a race to colonize the New World for European nations. This influenced the ideals of these new settlements, which had a powerful effect on the way the United States is today. One of the most significant influences the Europeans had on the United States is that Europeans formed colonies in the United States that went on to form an entire nation. These settlements were clones of the European countries they came from, including their values and religious views. When the Industrial Revolution began in many European countries in the 18th century, this triggered an American Industrial Revolution which led people away from being rich landowners, and the middle class was born. The middle class is still present in our modern society and is a staple in our economy. Without our middle class, wealth inequality would have a larger impact on our economy, and it would be impossible to diminish this inequality in the future. The colonization of China began in the mid-1800s and gradually expanded over time. This sparked a renewed interest in China putting their people first. European influence came to China later when they took to the seas and set up ports along the Asian coast. As ports were opened, trade began to blossom globally. The influence of Europeans came in many forms, and trading was only the beginning. Not only were ports and country customs established, Europe also pushed inland to begin the industrialization process. Iron factories and mines became prevalent in the country, and railroads were set up to aid in the transportation of resources and goods to other nations. There was a growing prevalence of European ideals within the government. After the British conquered China in 1839, a new type of government was established. Within this new influence government, new religious beliefs were growing in practice, as well as the acceptance of women in education and in the workforce. This new government set forth the framework for the modern government, the People's Republic of China. One strong influence on China was the establishment of the Communist Party. Communism is based on Marxist theory, but has developed into Maoism, China's interpretation of communism. This changed how goods and services were dispersed. This helped bring the overall wealth of the country up, despite their mass population and middle class. The influence that the communist government had on China was astounding. Once the party came into power and established themselves, involving a few ruling elite, the Communist Party became the predominant government system used. In the first decade under the Communist Party, the economy boomed. Overall, wealth increased and the power of the country increased. However, during the Great Leap Forward in the Cultural Revolution in China, spanning from the late 1950s to 1962, there was a large death toll and an overall significant economic malaise across the nation. This resulted in the nation's progress for development to be set back roughly 50 years. The Communist Party believes in a social system of equality. China has operated as a state capitalist regime since the late 1980s when they liberated their economy to reflect global neoliberalism. But when communism developed, citizens were required to register as one of three classes: good or red class, middle class, and bad or black class. The creation of these classes made class migration much harder than it was before. During the conquering of China, Britain established trading posts in India before colonizing the nation. When Britain colonized India in the 18th century, they influenced many aspects of their culture, but most importantly, the caste system. Britain's strong central government and powerful army was able to easily exploit India's weak global stratification system and monopolize it. The social stratification of India was heavily impacted by the influence of the British. European influence has had a significant effect on everyday life in India. Through the colonization of India, Europe brought an enormous amount of influence with them, especially their structure of caste system. British colonial rule simplified India's social class system by implementing a single society that was easily governed. The caste system represents the 4 levels of Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and the Shudras. Each level had their place in society, and efficiency was improved through the division of labor. The most prestigious group in the system are the Brahmins. This group consists of teachers and intellectuals. After this comes the Kshatriyas, which act as the warriors and rulers of the country. They protect society during warfare and have a significant role in governing during times of tranquility. Next is the Vaishyas, who are the merchants and traders of the community. At the bottom of this system is the Shudras. These are essentially the working class of the Indian system. At the bottom of the system are the Dalits. These people face discrimination, particularly in terms of education, marriage partners, and access to work. In addition to discrimination, they face frequent violence in their lives. The Hindu caste has dictated social status for years. These people that are in the higher parts of the system naturally have more power due to their inherent higher social class. This system has created segregated neighborhoods based on social standing, especially in rural areas. Until the 18th century, social class standings were not an important aspect of life to people living in India. When India was colonized by Britain in the late 18th century, this mindset changed dramatically into the system that is still seen today. The British rulers made the Indian caste system a defining social concept to implement a single society that was easily enforced. The scramble for Africa began in the 1870s to the 1900s. Europe invaded by using diplomatic measures and military pressure. Africans were acculturated due to the imperialist aggression from European powers. The abundance of raw materials that African states obtained allowed for years of colonial dominance and exploitation from Europe. European influence has had a dramatic effect on northern Africa, bringing changes to virtually every aspect of the area's land and people. The African economy was significantly altered by the slave trade through imperialism and imposed economic policies. Economic industry was largely shaped by European influence because colonialism impacted the demise of the African industry. Before the colonization of Africa, the continent was on a path of developing and advancing economically. When several European countries colonized northern Africa, they implemented new policies using manipulation and military force. The nations involved in this imperialism were in competition for total control of Europe, and the impact on the citizens in Africa was huge. These European countries spread their religion and received capital gain without negatively affecting their own citizens back in Europe. One major effect of colonization in Africa was the overcrowding that occurred once the European countries brought their own citizens to the colonized countries. Once overcrowding was in full effect, the exploitation of Africa's precious resources, such as diamonds, was immense. European influence is still prevalent in countries today. Whether it's Africa, India, China, or even the United States, European influence is still strong. This lasting effect proves how powerful the European system really was, and still is today. Today, we can see these effects still shown across these nations. The colonies that were formed by Europe in the United States went on to shape an entire nation. China gained a renewed interest in its people, and this is still prevalent today. The Hindu-Indian caste system is still practiced since the time it was implemented in the 18th century. Lastly, Northern Africa's economy has forever been changed by the imposed economic policies of European colonization. Society has been stratified into social classes due to the significant impact European influence had on other countries. By enforcing their own cultural values and economic policies, Europe was able to create global inequality. This unequal distribution of resources allowed for an imbalance of class. The imprints left by Europe allowed for countries to shape and develop their own values that we see today.